Andrew Jackson's just fucking crazy. Also, there's another great story about Andrew Jackson about he used to let people into the White House, as a lot of presidents used to for parties and stuff like that. And a dude walked up to him, an assassin, walked up to him and tried to kill him and had 2 pistols, and both the pistols jammed, and Andrew Jackson beat the shit out of him.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to A Conversation with Colin. I'm Greg, and this is my roommate, Colin. Now, sometimes Colin says crazy stuff. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I reach into my random topic pile, pull one out, show it to Colin for the first time ever, and we have a conversation about it. If you like that, like the video, subscribe to us here on YouTube, and then please share it with your friends so more people find out how crazy my roommate is. Colin, are you ready?
Yes.
Today's topic of conversation is rank the top 10 presidents. This is courtesy of Chris Derby. Thank you, Chris. I'm gonna get up real quick and get a pen, but you're welcome to start.
Okay. I need to write too.
Okay, I'm coming over.
Yeah.
Hold on.
This is gonna be a tough one.
Here we go. I got some note cards and a marker here. This is an Oreo oration card.
See.
Don't write on that, but watch Oreo oration every Wednesday and Friday on youtube.com/GameWorker.
Sorry, this is gonna take a minute.
No, you're fine. I'll talk over it. My top president, Abraham Lincoln. I like the hat.
The
I
hat?
like the beard. Yeah. I like that he haunts the White House.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Number 2, Barack Obama. Just to make you mad.
That's fine. Teddy.
Now, explain to me, are you writing down right now your favorites in general, and then you're going to rank them, or are you trying to go in order right now?
Yeah, I'm going in order in my mind in which they were served, in which they served.
Okay. In which they serve. As long as it's chronological, I guess we're all happy with this one. It doesn't really matter. Who's the last great president you think we had? Ronald Reagan? Clinton brought down employment.
I'd probably say Clinton was the last great president. Okay. Sorry, I'm doing this. This is all real time here.
Don't worry, we can fast forward. All right, once I figure out how to do that effect.
Oh yeah, what the fuck am I thinking?
What the fuck are you thinking? Get your shit together. God. You gotta have a case for each one of these now.
6, 7, 8.
I like just the inclusion here. You got a greater than symbol all set to go.
Actually, it was just because he fits in here.
Yeah.
One more.
Carter.
Let's see.
Good job, Chris Derby.
I'm just running through them all again.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
No, this is your conversation, Colin.
I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone.
That's fine. While you do that, I'll regale people with a story. On 4th of July, Colin likes to drink to the presidents. Him and his goofy friends get together, and they do shots to the presidents. And they say their little thing while they do it. You and Sin over there and talking about who your favorite is. You once puked on a porch after doing it.
Yeah, and then passed out. That was like a 1 in the afternoon too.
4th of July. Colin's holiday.
I'm tempted to do it.
Do it.
Okay, so I have 10 names here.
Yeah, and now you're gonna rank them.
Yeah, so
you're starting at 10?
Let's start at 10.
Starting at 10, ladies and gentlemen. Colin Moriarty's top 10 presidents. Starting at 10. Number 10.
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
Now, I like Bill Clinton because, first of all, Bill Clinton was elected in somewhat of a dubious way, I think, because this is something I talk about a lot with people that like to vote for third parties and what could possibly happen when you vote for third parties. You typically, folks out there, you typically vote in you don't vote in your own self-interest when you vote third party because you end up hurting yourself. And let me give you an example. Okay?
Please do.
In 1912, right, long before Bill Clinton was born.
Long before, yes.
There was a presidential election in 1912. And Taft was the Republican incumbent. He was running against a guy named Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democrat. Teddy Roosevelt could have run again in 1908, right? Yes, but he didn't. And Taft was kind of like his protege, and Taft came in. But in 1912, he wasn't too pleased with how Taft was doing, so he decided to run third party. The party was called the Bull Moose Party. And Teddy Roosevelt took something like 10 or 11% of the vote, mostly Republicans, that would have voted for Taft, and Woodrow Wilson won. So a third party gave us a president that we probably shouldn't have been given.
Yeah.
In 1992, something very similar, I think, happened. Bill Clinton was running, a totally competent governor of Arkansas, 3 terms, I think. And he was running against the incumbent George H.W. Bush, who had lied about raising taxes, so he was very unpopular at that point.
Yeah.
And then Ross Perot ran. And Ross Perot is the most successful of all third-party candidates
Of course.
in American history. And at a time in the summer of 1992 was actually winning. Now, Ross Perot dropped out of the race briefly and then came back in, and people suggest that actually really injured him, and it did. He might have actually won the election. We might be having a different conversation at that point. But mostly because he was a conservative-leaning person, he was against things like NAFTA, for instance. People that voted for him were mostly conservatives, and that took away from George H.W. Bush, and then we got Clinton. Now, it's not quite as clear-cut. There was other factors.
I mean, how many percent did he get? Yeah, I don't know.
He got almost 20% of the vote.
Wow, okay.
So Ross Perot was like a tour de force as a third-party candidate, even compared to Teddy Roosevelt. And the same thing happened, and I know we have a lot of liberal viewers out there. The reason George W. Bush was elected, of course, was because of a third-party candidacy, namely Ralph Nader. Mm-hmm. So Bill Clinton was elected, regardless of how he was elected, he was a man of the center. I think that he proved that he can work with both sides, and that the 90s were actually a really great time in American history. Indisputably. And I really like Bill Clinton. I think Bill Clinton's like a good dude. I think he kind of got thrown under the bus by some overzealous politicians who wanted to get involved with his sex life. He shouldn't have lied about it, but he didn't really do anything illegal. The perjury was actually what was illegal. But he worked with both sides of the aisle. He worked famously with a Republican House, which was the first Republican House in decades. And they came in and didn't seem like they were going to work with Clinton, but Clinton kind of got what he wanted. And what we got were a combination of, a lot of tax revenue along with some tax cuts, record low unemployment, and general prosperity in the 90s. So that's the reason I like Bill Clinton. I think he's a good dude, and I think he's playing ball with Barack Obama now, obviously because his wife's going to run in 2016. But I don't think that the Clinton family is nearly as liberal as most of the Democratic Party, and I think that's why they're very popular in the Midwest and the South.
Interesting.
So there's that.
Number 9 on Colin Moriarty's top 10 president list.
Let's see, we got Clinton here.
Yeah, Clinton at 10.
So 9.
Tough stuff here.
Let's go with Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Oh, Ike. I like Ike.
So Eisenhower, of course, became famous in World War II. He was Allied commander and quite an astute military man, obviously. And we have a history in America of electing military men, starting, of course, with George Washington. Mm-hmm. We had guys like William Henry Harrison, Andrew Jackson, Zachary Taylor, and so on, Ulysses Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, a lot of guys that fought. And what I really respected about Eisenhower, amongst other things, was that he was a reasonable Republican. We talked about Republicans and rational Republicans, and Eisenhower is certainly a rational thinking Republican that did things that were hard, but that were right, including creation of the interstate system that we rely on so much today.
Love that interstate.
One of the most interesting things about Eisenhower, though, is that as a man of the military, a man who you think would be in the corner of the military, he warned us about something called the military-industrial complex, which is something that we deal with today, something where a self-fulfilling prophecy almost of the military becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and controlling a sector of the economy in which it kind of extracts what it wants, and to just be careful of a burgeoning military that really doesn't serve a purpose except for lining the pockets of people and stuff like that, and maybe even becoming dangerous to the people that support it. So Eisenhower is an interesting man, an interesting Republican, a well-respected Republican, probably one of the most well-respected presidents, I think, of all time on both sides of the aisle. And obviously, coming after FDR, he wasn't able to run again, but I'm sure he actually probably would have won a third term if he was able to. Okay. JFK ran in 1960, of course, and won.
Yeah. So Eisenhower, number 9. Of course, Eisenhower, if you remember, ladies and gentlemen, the cereal piece that little Pete got caught in his nose in The Adventures of Pete and Pete on Nickelodeon. Number 8 on Colin Moriarty's top 10 presidents of all time.
Let's do FDR.
FDR!
Now, FDR gets a lot of shit, including from people like me.
Who's giving FDR all that much shit?
FDR is I would say, one of the most divisive presidents. Even though when you look at like the Schlesinger poll and other historical scholarly polls that rank the presidents, and he's usually very high up, he's very divisive because FDR did a lot of unsavory things. But he
sat down a lot.
He did. He sat down a lot because he had to, because he had polio.
What? Oh, I'm sorry.
But FDR was a 4-term president, the only president in American history to actually serve more than 2 terms. So there is no 3-term president.
When he was the king.
He was the king.
How did that happen? How did he get away with 3 terms?
I think it's a sign of the times. I mean, he was elected.
Well, there's an amendment now, right?
Yeah, that was a direct response to FDR.
Gotcha.
FDR was elected in 1932, and that was, the Great Depression started with a crash in 1929 in which, Hoover was president or whatever, and then Hoover was voted out, FDR came in, and so it's a sign of the times that he was elected. Things started to get a little bit better, then they started to get a little bit worse, but FDR was a man of the people who tried to fix things by creating governmental programs that I think kind of saddle us and stuff like that, and aren't necessarily good for us long term, such as Social Security, but at the time, those programs made sense and made him very popular.
Sure.
And then, of course, the war broke out with the Nazis and the Japanese first and then the Nazis.
Yeah.
Starting in 1941, involving us, and we launched ourselves into that war in 42. And so there was just a bunch of situations where you don't want to switch horses midstream. But I think FDR deserves a lot of respect and a lot of credit because he brought us through those trying times, even if some of the things he did, I think, were detrimental to getting better. Okay. I think a lot of governmental programs like the New Deal and stuff were good in premise, but actually extended the Depression by making people rely on the government instead of letting the market kind of correct itself. But FDR also vanquished the Japanese almost. Truman was obviously the one that dropped the bombs. And he vanquished the Nazis too. So, I mean, he deserves a lot of credit. FDR is a wartime president, and frankly, he should be a hero to both sides.
Okay. There you go. Both sides get it together. Number 7.
It's going to be a long conversation.
Yeah. If you want to start shortening them up, I won't stop you. But I don't mind either way.
So, sorry, I'm gonna write.
You're gonna write the other numbers too to get yourself going?
Numbers down here. Let's see. Let's do.
Well, like this, you've already picked number 1. Number 1's set. You have your number 1. Oh, you have your number 2 too. There's a lot going on over here, ladies and gentlemen. You are in for some treats coming up.
This is very unofficial. I mean, I need to really think.
Colin Moriarty's unofficial top 10 president.
I need to think more about these if I was really gonna do it.
What do you mean? This is great. You're doing fine. I don't like this. I'm sure you're in the shower, shampooing up your hair, thinking about this.
I am. I'm always in the shower shampooing my hair. All right, so we're at number 7.
Number 7.
I would say number 7 is Reagan. I really love Ronald Reagan. I think he exerted a lot of strength, but also knew how to play his cards well. And I think that even though he was president during some, again, unsavory things happening, especially in Central America, the Iran-Contra scandal, for instance. There were some things that he did that were good too. I mean, we were suffering from a general economic malaise in the late 70s during Carter and early 80s. The 80s were a boom time in the United States. Reagan was the president for most of that until 88 when his vice president, Bush, was elected. I think Reagan exerted powerful foreign policy and should be credited with bringing the Soviet Union down, even though the Soviet Union was kind of crumbling under its own weight. I mean, he was the one who told them to tear down this wall in Berlin, for instance.
Infamously told them to tear down that wall.
Not infamously, famously.
Infamously.
It wasn't infamous.
Well, if you're one of those people.
Yeah.
You like the wall. Infamous.
Oh, there was a lot of people that liked the wall when they were in East Germany. That was very popular amongst East Germans.
All right.
Number 6 is Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson is an interesting man because he's an interesting man for a lot of reasons. Much like Ulysses Grant, I think, when he became president, much of what Jefferson did happened before he was president. That, I think, was interesting. And even though Jefferson had an interesting presidency, I think to ignore his influence on American politics generally and the course of American history in the 18th and early 19th century is a fallacy. And even though John Adams isn't on this list, one of the fascinating things that people should look into is the feud between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson that really kind of started during the Revolution and then really got heated during the presidential election when Jefferson was elected over Adams. And how they had this feud going forever, but once they were old men, they started to talk to each other again and exchanged a lot of letters and a lot of affections with each other or whatever. And then they died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, I believe.
Creepy.
Number 5.
Number 5 on Colin's top 10 list of presidents.
He used to be my favorite president, but I've soured on him a little bit.
Used to be your favorite president, dropped to 5.
Yeah.
That's a big fall.
When I was a young kid. Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh,
number
okay.
5.
Creator of the teddy bear.
Yes, not really the creator of the teddy bear, but named after Teddy Roosevelt, of course.
Right. I like thinking he made the first teddy bear.
Teddy Roosevelt's interesting because he's a Republican. But Teddy Roosevelt is really one of the first environmentalists and one of the first people that kind of crossed over conservatism and liberalism generally, I think. And so, he believed in a strong foreign policy He even fought in the Spanish-American War in 1898 to kind of get his own military credentials, as it were. And the Rough Riders come from this.
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, Rough Riders.
But
Good
Teddy,
rap group.
But Teddy Roosevelt strikes a chord with me because, like, we talked about Republicans that kind of hold their party line very strictly, and I don't, in the sense that I believe that we should care for our environment, not necessarily go overboard with, like, we can't drill oil and we can't fuck with the shale here and all this stuff. I don't get it crazy. Let's not build this pipeline because this species of fish might be killed. Like, all right, enough. But he was a guy who was like, we should preserve land. We should care about the environment and do all those things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it was a very bold move. The term progressive is associated with liberals today, but really the term progressive was also associated with a Republican, Teddy Roosevelt. And I think that that's really interesting. It is worth noting, of course, though, that the first national park was U.S. Grant, actually, was the first person to denote a national park, not Teddy Roosevelt.
Gotcha.
Number 4 would be Abraham Lincoln. Now, I know you brought up Abraham
Honest
Lincoln.
Abe.
He's a son of your state of Illinois, and Lincoln is great for obvious reasons. Now, Lincoln, should not get all the credit in the world. He did bend and break a lot of rules during the Civil War, but the Civil War was a trying time, and people ignore that the states had already started to leave when he was elected, but before he was sworn in. So he really can't be blamed for the situation in which he was brought in under.
Kind of like Obama.
Yeah, it's kind of like Obama, sure. But yeah, Lincoln, preserved the Union.
He did what he had to do.
Yeah, and I'm always interested in the course of American history as we kind of go through this firestorm of presidents here. We're not really spending any time on them, so I'll move on. But I will say, Lincoln's interesting in the sense that if John Wilkes Booth didn't kill him in 1865, right after the war, what kind of president would he have been in the Reconstruction era and the post-war era? How many terms would have he even gotten elected? I often think about that with Lincoln because he was just reelected, and then we got Andrew Johnson, which was a whole disaster in its own right.
Gotcha.
Number 3, James Madison.
James Madison.
Now, James Madison's interesting because he's the father of the Constitution, of course, but also one of my favorite stories about Madison is about the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was fought during Madison's presidency, and he was kind of brought under the control of the hawks in the House and the Senate that wanted to fight this war with Britain. And they invaded Canada and did all this crazy shit. And as a result, in 1814, our capital got burned down. And a lot of people don't know that. You can still see the burn marks on the White House today when they strip the paint in certain places from the burn marks when the British burned the house down. And my favorite story about James Madison, and of course he did a lot of great things when he was president, but the great story about him is that he refused to leave the White House when the British were storming Washington. And the story goes that as the Redcoats were coming in the front door, he left out the back door. So they were like really close to, the British were really close to capturing the American president, which is really wild when you think about it. That's never even come close to happening ever, except for that one time. And I think that's pretty fascinating stuff. And of course, that's also when his wife, Dolly Madison, cut out with a knife the picture, the famous portrait of Washington.
That's why the corner's going, right?
Yeah, and then she rolled it up and left. So a lot of interesting stuff about the Madisons. Number 2 is Andrew Jackson.
Oh, Mr. $20 bill. The sawbuck.
Andrew Jackson's interesting. Andrew Jackson's a fucking nut job. And that's like why I love him so much.
What does that mean? What did he do?
First of all, I suggest everyone read a book called American Lion that's all about Andrew Jackson. It's absolutely fascinating reading about Andrew Jackson. But there are so many awesome stories about Andrew Jackson, it's hard to even know like where to begin and where to end.
Okay.
When Andrew Jackson was 13 years old, during the beginning of the Revolution, he was captured by a British officer. And the British officer asked him to clean his boots. And, as like a sign of disrespect, whatever, and Andrew Jackson refused. And the officers cut him with a cutlass in his face, and that's why he had a scar on his face.
Gotcha.
But as he got older, he became a hero, obviously, in the War of 1812, and specifically in the Battle of New Orleans. The interesting thing about the Battle of New Orleans, which happened in 1815, was that the war was already over, but the word hadn't gotten to them yet, so they still fought each other in this battle that really ended up meaning nothing at all. But Jackson helped hold New Orleans from British attack. And there's just a lot of great stories about him in the frontier and dealing with people. Andrew Jackson murdered people, like in duels. Like he murdered people. Like we know that about Andrew Jackson, and he just got away with it. Like Andrew Jackson just got away with whatever he wanted to get away with. And there's also a famous story about him getting shot in a duel in the chest and then blowing the dude's head off after he got shot. And then he had this bullet in his chest for years, and he got it removed when he was an old man. So Andrew Jackson's just fucking crazy. Also, there's another great story about Andrew Jackson about he used to let people into the White House, as a lot of presidents used to for parties and stuff like that. And a dude walked up to him, an assassin, walked up to him and tried to kill him and had 2 pistols, and both the pistols jammed, and Andrew Jackson beat the shit out of him with his own hands.
That's awesome.
Until like people had to pull him off. As the president of the United States, he was doing this to this guy.
I like this
Andrew
guy.
Jackson's fucking awesome. I mean, Andrew Jackson's also responsible for the Trail of Tears, so we have to kind of,
Sure, that's why he's not number 1.
No.
But number 1 on Colin Moriarty's top 10 list of presidents.
George Washington.
Number 1, Mr. 1.
What's Mr. One it is.
That's what they call them, I think, right?
What's interesting about George Washington is there's a fucking million things interesting about George Washington, but one of the best stories about Washington I'll leave you with, and people can read about Washington himself, about how he wanted to relinquish power. He never wanted power. He was a man that we should really respect in that way. He could have had anything he wanted.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be president. They elected him president, and then he didn't want to be reelected, and they reelected him, and he served, and then he wanted to go back to his house. But if you read about the Whiskey Rebellion, which happened in 1795, that was basically the first. It was an internal rebellion right after Washington became president, and George Washington, not being an armchair general, rode at the front of the column that would go and fight and put down the rebellion. So if you could imagine a sitting president fighting in a battle, that is what George Washington did.
Interesting.
So he's just an interesting dude, and obviously he's our first president. He set the 2-term precedent, for instance, and stuff like that. So for many other reasons, George Washington would be number 1.
All right.
That's it.
All right, well, there you go. Thank you
That
so
was a
much.
very long
That was a great one, though. Thank you very much, Chris Derby, for submitting your topic. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be part of the conversation with Colin, leave your suggestion below in the comments. We will pull from those, put them in the random topic pile. Colin won't know them until they get them right now. We had some fun today, Colin.
Yes.
If you had fun, make sure you like the video, subscribe to us here on YouTube, share it with your friends so they can see how crazy Colin Moriarty is. Until then, we will be back every Tuesday and Thursday. I hope you have a conversational day.
But like if someone took a shot at Wayne Gretzky, Marty McSorley would punch you in your face.